Melba Duncan started life as an EA before she set up executive search company, the Duncan Group, based in New York. She is legendary. Most of you will have seen that iconic interview and article on Harvard Business Review on why executives need assistance. Here, she did me the great honour of allowing me to interview her for an hour, firstly on her career, secondly on why an assistant is indispensable, and thirdly on what she's hoping her legacy is going to be. Good afternoon, Melba, and thank you so much for taking the time to come and spend time with us this afternoon.
And I thank you very much, Lucy, for this invitation and for this opportunity. It is my privilege. Thank you.
I'm sure we're just going to learn so much from you. I always do. And we've got so much to talk about. But what I wanted to do, first of all, is to ask you a little bit about your background and who your parents were. Where did you come from? What was your childhood like? Because everybody sees Melba Duncan up on stage, you're talking to us and talking about the profession, but very few of us have ever had a chance to really get to know you.
Oh, my goodness. So I was born in Jamaica, West Indies, we all know, raised by a Jamaican family. There's a town called Duncan's in Jamaica. So the family had a way of being that was acknowledged. My father left us in Jamaica and went to Toronto, Canada, and studied at McGill University. When he completed and he would come back and forth. When he completed his studies, he then moved to America and brought us to America, my mother and my two sisters. And so we were raised in an area in New York City called Brooklyn. And my father said he had rented an apartment, and how we were raised was you always own where you live. I mean, there were some very strong principles in our home. How you sit, how you speak, how you meet and greet. Time we had to be silent. We sat at a table for dinner. We had to know which which fork to use. We had to know the upbringing was very, very strict and relentless. How we walked in the street, how we held our head. My father would say, you are better than everyone else. I don't ever want you to live that way. But I want you to remember that no one can tell you that you are less than. And he would remind us, especially when we were in America, he would remind us of the behaviors and the reasons why things happen. To look at my father, you would not have recognized that he was Jamaican. He looked pretty much Irish, but he's Jamaican. To look at my mother, she looks as though she came from Kenya. That's my mother. So we had both of these worlds in our world. And what we had to do was learn how to live with integrity. It doesn't mean we weren't kids and we didn't do things that we shouldn't have done. But it didn't stop us. Nothing that I wanted to do did stop me based on what he said. Be who you are first. Let others worry about who you're not, but be who you are. Those are my father's teachings. And again, very strict, very disciplined, which, are the basic foundations of being a good assistant. So discipline was not a problem for me. It just came naturally. We had to be that way. I had two wonderful sisters. And, my father said, education, that's where we go. That's what's important in this family. So that's how I was raised, very strict. And in many ways, if I were to think about it today, I would say they kept us apart from what the rest of the world thought. They taught us how to be, but also how to go out into the world. So my parents were wonderful gifts to us.
And that dignity and that belief in education shine through in everything that you do. Even now, I can see it. So how did you get into the administrative profession? Because I know that you had a very successful career as an EA before you went on to found the Duncan Group, didn't you? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I think so. After graduating high school and receiving, sort of this A grade, I thought I would get into college, and I was denied, and I didn't know why I was denied, but there are reasons. We understand the reasons today. And so I said to my father and my mother, I am going to get a position. I don't know what I'll do, but I know that whoever hires me, I will do my best, etc. By the way, I play the piano, so I had a lot of agility. I never knew what a typewriter was or anything. I just knew I had the agility. We all had to learn. We had to learn music when we were growing up. So I go out and I apply for a position at Continental Assurance Company. And they said, okay, you can be a receptionist. I had no idea what that meant, but I had individuals around me who coached and directed me. And dressing properly was something we had to do all the time anyway, so that was not new. And as I'm working there, the assistant to the CEO or the president of that company comes over to me one day and says, I need someone who can answer the telephone for me, who can help me. Would it be all right with you if I asked for you to be transferred to work with me? And I said, of course. So my first real understanding of what it's like to work for a principal was that experience. I took the messages, and obviously I take them without any mistakes. Messages, communication, tone of voice, all the things you learn. And from there, I was called one day and someone said, Melba, I've seen you at Continental, and I thought there would be an opportunity for you to work at a company called Sanford C. Bernstein and Company. So I went in to the HR person. She said to me, Melba, go ahead. Go ahead. People encourage us. So I went to work for Bernstein. And I was at the front desk. And one day he comes over to me, Sanford C. Bernstein, and he says, I need you to work in my office because my assistant is now ill and I don't have anyone there. So I need 2 people. So come on in, be here right now. And he was someone who did not necessarily have the most gracious way of communicating. And so I would hear this language all the time, which was so different than how I grew up. And so one day, and he would do this with people, and then he said to me, oh, you have 6 months to pass the registered rep exam, which means I can trade securities on the exchange. If you fail the test, you're fired. Now, I'm not going to fail. No. So I get a B plus, and he comes out, he says, a B plus? Why isn't this not an A? This was Sandy Bernstein. So he goes on and uses this language. And I said to him one day, I went in, I said, may I say something to you, please? He said, yes. What is it? I said, you went to Harvard. Don't you have a better vocabulary? And he did exactly what you did. He just started laughing. He didn't change. He didn't stop at the vocabulary, but every time he would say a word, and we had a window where he was able to see, every time he would say some of these words that I never heard before, and I certainly have not heard again, he would just look at me. And I noticed that the words, he subsided with the language. So after a while, I just thought, okay, this is what you do. You speak to the person you care about. This is what's really relevant. This is what's important. And then I get the call about Pete Peterson. He had just left the White House. And I suppose someone spoke to Sandy, and Sandy said, yes, let Melba go and interview. They called me 5 times for the interview. The 5th time I said, I am sorry, I cannot leave my office again. Because every time I come down, it's hours and hours. You're on Wall Street, I'm uptown. And so I have to decline the opportunity. The next thing I know, I get a call, and they said, the CEO would like to meet with you. I said, fine. So I go down. Sandy Bernstein had a Rolls Royce and a driver. He said, Solomon, I want you to drive Melba downtown for this meeting. So here I am. I look the way I do. I'm in the back of a Rolls Royce, and I'm going for an interview for a position with the CEO of Lehman Brothers. And so I walked in, and Pete Peterson was sitting way at the end of the boardroom, and my heart is pounding. And he looks at me, and he didn't say a word. All he said was, when can you start? That was it. 10 years later, I left with Pete. He started the Blackstone Group, and he sat down with me and said, what would you like to do next? I said, I'd like to do something on television. He said, absolutely not. What would you like to do next? I said, well, I've been working in recruiting with the HR team, et cetera, interviewing people for these roles. I think I could do that as a business. So he sat down with Russ Reynolds, who is still a wonderful colleague today, and they designed the Duncan Group. And so 30 years later, or 32 years later, I'm doing this.
It's just amazing. It's such a wonderful story. For those of you that don't know the Duncan Group, explain what it is, because I know that if you are anybody of any kind of substance and you're looking for an EA, you are the first people that they go to, right?
That's right. And, I'm delighted. We are a retained search. If the business was set up by Russ Reynolds Associates, how we proceed, how we process, we do not work outside of a retainer. That also elevates the level and the population that we represent. Because my argument was and is, if CEOs or managers are looking for positions, they go to a retained search firm. Why wouldn't those individuals who support them have the same opportunity? So we are retained. As a result of that, we've been asked to do a lot of consulting. So we'll go into companies, look at their structure, look at the issues they're facing, create a communication system. We will do training. If the client thinks that they need to have a team that's more relatable, et cetera, whatever those issues are, we will understand the issues and take the team in and deliver a training product. I also do a lot of, we have the Institute. So we have the offline training and the online training, which we are now thinking about doing. I'm not sure yet how to do that. But we have the Institute, and the Institute is founded, the high-level training is founded by professors from Columbia University. They actually train and they actually designed the Institute Premier program. Anyone who wants to do 6 days of intense training by Columbia University professors will take this course. So, and then of course we do boot camps, et cetera. We do a lot of exchanges, a lot of communication. So it's about enhancing the workplace and really advising those who hire what this role is. So to me, changing the attitude, changing how the work is perceived, changing how this is not a job, it's a profession. And anyone who does this work needs to think of themselves as in a professional status. This isn't just a job. Not everyone can do this. It takes an inordinate amount of intelligence and relativity to be able to manage the consequences of this role. And I use that word, very, very succinctly. The consequences of this. You make a serious mistake, there's a serious problem. So the reliability on this support team, which people are saying, technology has replaced. We know that can't be. It's a tool. Technology is like anything else. It's a tool. It's the innovative intelligence that this level of relationship is able to manage without reservation. So the most intelligent people, Lucy, I think, are assistants. The most intelligent people, because they've had to learn on their own. They had to learn the hard way. And so that's my commitment to this role, to those who do this work, because I think I understand what it takes. I made some terrible mistakes when I worked with Pete. But, the idea is you own your mistakes. You say, Pete, I'm sorry. And he says, okay, that's fine. Thank you. And you keep going. And you think the next day I'm going to be fired. But you're not. Why? Because you own it and because you learn from it. It's a huge role. And I continue to say that.
I think you basically single-handedly were responsible for changing the perception of the role. And when you wrote your iconic article, which appeared in Harvard Business Review almost 10 years ago now.
Right.
How did that come about, A? And B, did you ever expect for it still to be as relevant now, 10 years on, as it was then?
No, I didn't. The thing that what we were taught growing up is you need to achieve, but that doesn't make you better than anybody else. So although we had to think we were, but when I received the call that somebody heard me speak and said, we would like to ask you to put together some ideas about what this role is and what your experience has been. And then they called me from Harvard Business Review, the editor, and he said, can you send that to me? And I said, of course I can. So it was just somewhere out of the blue. And I thought, I am going to write about what this profession is. And so I went to a few of my colleagues that are outlined in that article. And after I spoke to, for example, Loretta Sophocles, Noreen Denahan. Noreen works for the CEO of Clayton, Dubilier and Rice, who's helped me with this other book I'm working with, Indispensability. These are all the people who really substantiate the role. And when I said to Loretta and to Noreen and the others I spoke to, I said, are you willing to offer some suggestions about what this role can be? They said, absolutely, because nobody hears. So when I sent the first outline, he said, okay, let's get it done. And I said, okay. And then when I saw it come out, I could not believe it. But, I think that article is relevant today because we need more of us, and I say us, to be in that level of communication. We need more to be said about what this role now must be with all that we are facing. And we need to hear not that the assistant role has never changed and it's the same, and you could be a secretary and that is an offensive term, really, or you could be what we refer to as executive life managers. That's what you do. Once you start to establish the credibility and the foundation of this role, as Pete Peterson said, the foundation of this role, what makes it an imperative in the workplace, it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. So that's how Harvard Business Review came about. And after that, they asked me a few more publications came out from Harvard Business Review. But I think it's important for us to have these messages, such as you deliver, such as Bonnie and Vicky deliver. It's important to keep that out there, especially now, Lucy, when people are saying, is my job over?
Totally. I mean, do you ever feel frustrated with the fact that it isn't moving quicker to get assistants into a position whereby businesses understand exactly what it is that they can add to the picture?
I do. I feel that because you know what it is? It's also how we have been educated to think about what this role is. When I speak to assistants and they'll say, I have this problem with this, and I'll say, well, why can't you get yourself on the calendar and sit down and speak to them? Well, he or she won't take the time to speak to me, but you don't know that. You don't know that until you open that door. And if you don't open the door, how do you know what's behind it? So to me, the courage that's needed in the workplace from our population of assisting needs to be reinforced. You have the assistant today knows everything about that executive he or she supports. You just know it. You know exactly what's going on in that business. You know exactly where the pitfalls happen to be. You know exactly where the issues are. Now, these are all confidential matters and ideas, but they reinforce what it is you must do every day. They reinforce your decisions. Why wouldn't you step into your space and look at what else you might be able to do to advance that role? So the confidence building, I think, rests with us, Lucy, rests with us to say, without you, trust me, there are executives at home who are terrified because they don't know what's going on.
I would agree.
They're terrified. They don't know. Melba, I had no idea this is what was taking place. And I'd say, I know you didn't. And when they call and they say, well, Melba, tell me who I need to hire, and I outline what the specifics are, they say, wait a moment, you can find someone who does that? I said, absolutely. So you see, there needs to be, and I want to encourage a conversation for managers and leaders and CEO who are now, as I said, devastated because they don't have that face-to-face. So have the courage and the commitment to yourself to have in place what it is you need. The second thing is, and I always say this, never work for someone you neither respect nor like. That to me gets you nowhere. You'll do the best because that's how we are taught to do our best. But work for somebody who respects you and respects your contribution. They may lose it every once in a while, we all do. But work for someone who is consistently reliable and respects what it is you do and who you are. Pete never had someone walk in where he didn't say, "Did you ask Melba?" Or "This is Melba." Or somebody would walk in and say, "Oh, you must be Melba." Okay. So someone who doesn't have any fear at all about the right person who supports and helps that person to succeed, because that's what you're doing. Assistants help others to succeed.
They absolutely do. I am really interested that you have started to call assistants executive life managers. Can you talk to us about that? And how important do you think job titles are anyway?
Oh, I think job titles are essential. And they are very, very important because everyone falls into the category of, quote, administrative assistant. Well, what does that mean? Executive assistant. Well, everybody's an executive assistant. What does that mean? So I started, but because we write position descriptions for clients, to distinguish for the higher level of, and for those who want to reach this level, the categories of management, leadership, strategic support. We break that down into, here are the functions that fall under the definition of management, that fall under the definition of leadership. Assistants are leaders. They don't even know it. They are leaders, and fall under the definition of strategic support. That makes you and brings you to the level of business partnership. Now, that executive actually agrees with what you do and how you do it. So now your business partners, what happens in that business, what happens to that person, you're in partnership. To me, taking that is not senior level executive assistant. That is a great title and it's appropriate, but I want to move the needle. And I want to move the needle for a lot of reasons. One is the recognition and the accomplishment and the compensation. And to me, executive assistants today who comply with that formula and see themselves within that formula can now look at themselves and say, that's right, executive life management. That's what I do. Everything in that executive's life that lands at my desk or now on my computer, everything is my responsibility, whether it's making sure, and I'm going to bring this down to this level, making sure that the dog is picked up on time, to the same thing as making sure that flight's on time, to the same thing as making sure the executive is meeting with a team of 10. You know who those individuals are. You know their backgrounds, you know the purpose of the meeting, you know the strategy behind the meeting, and so you can create for yourself the language you need to speak to that executive. I know you're meeting with those 10 directors on Tuesday. Here's what I think the agenda might be. Start showing what you know. No one knows what you know. They know what you don't know, but they don't know what you know. So exemplify that. Here's an idea. Here are the people coming. Here are the backgrounds. Here's the agenda. We're going to take a break here and make sure coffee gets served or tea gets served so everyone can relax and say hello to each other. Set up this scenario that helps that executive not have to think about those issues. Think about how to make the business stronger and better and far more competitive. That's where that executive needs to land. Where I land as the assistant is making sure I understand that, and here's what I need to get done. So there's a huge responsibility, and therefore you need a title that captures that executive life management and that manager. And the word manager, to me, is essential. Manager, I manage the processes. I manage the complications before it even gets to that executive. I've resolved it. Why? Because I'm innovative and I'm intuitive and I really understand what my role is. So know who you are and know what your role is and put that to work. So that's what that title represents.
I love hearing you talk. I could listen to you talk all day. I know that you have been working on a new book,
Yes,
Indispensability, and
yes.
I just wanted you to talk to us a little bit about what the premise is behind that book.
It is exactly that. And I did this, Lucy, because I wanted to also speak to Pete Peterson about this, because Pete wrote the preface. I've been working on this book for some time.
I
And every
know.
time we have changes in the workplace, uh, I I look at what this book is about, which is the enhancement of the skill set of the executive assistant. Don Gogel of Clayton, DeBoer, and Rice has contributed to this book. Obviously, Pete Peterson wrote the preface. I have other CEOs who have submitted their ideas of what this role is and what their expectations happen to be. So I don't want it to be a book that's just, here's what you need to learn, X, Y, and Z. I want the philosophy behind the new learning. I want the implication of not knowing how to manage this role. What does that mean for you as a member of this profession? So these CEOs have written for me and produced for me these ideas behind the competence of this role, behind the competence that's required. And because they are well, blessings for Pete, but certainly Don Gogel remains a great colleague and friend. That's Noreen Danahan's boss. And, I pick up the phone, I say, Noreen, she goes, hold on, I'll put Don on. So it's that kind of relationship that enables this thinking. What are the skills and attitudes that we need to have, not today, but for the future? What are those skills? And they are broken down into those categories of leadership and management and, of course, strategic support. But what does leadership mean at the assistant level? It means you show others how to be. It means you understand confidences. It means you understand the strategy and you set up systems that enhance that strategy. What does management mean? It means that you take responsibility for all that's taking everything. It's almost as though you scoop everything up and you put it into these categories and you organize and present. So the thinking behind this is literally genius level, because you're not doing it for yourself. It isn't where Melba's working for Melba. I'm working for Pete. Therefore, I have to think as if I'm Pete. I can't be Pete, but I can think the way I think he would want me to. And by doing that, you're learning. So learning in how to help someone else to be great, guess what? You're also learning about yourself and how to make yourself great. So the book is about, here are the strategies. Here is what exists now in this role. Here's the new learning opportunities that we must see in the workplace today in order to be relevant and current. And one of the things that Pete wrote, if I may take a moment, that I thought was great as we're looking at times in today, it's time to dispel the ambiguity about what makes a nation great and display the leadership to act with integrity and courage. He wrote a whole beautiful premise. That's from Pete Peterson. And to me, that's really what this book is all about. The leadership, the direction, the skill set, the opportunity, the learning. How do I handle a strategy? How do I handle, we have case studies that everyone needs to be able to read and see how they would manage the problem. So the book, I think, will be a lot of pages, but it will also, I hope, be a manual going forward. And CEOs have spoken to this.
I read a first draft and I can't wait to read the finished product when it finally comes out. It is absolute genius. And I think, a lot of assistants will find it hugely useful. So watch this space. I know that you talk a lot about education being at the heart of what makes a great assistant and that we should always be learning. And indeed, you've talked a lot about that today. But I know you also always stress the importance of personal attributes. Can you talk about what particular personal attributes you think contribute to making an assistant indispensable?
First, I would start with, if this can be, I think it's an attribute, a sense of humor. If you can't laugh at the circumstances, because I think of them as I'm sitting here. If you can't laugh at the circumstances that occur practically every moment of every day, that enables you to smile no matter what's taking place, that to me is probably the greatest teaching in the workplace. That's management and that's leadership. That's leadership. Yes, I understand this happened, but we got through it and it's great. I think for assistants, integrity, the fact that I know something about someone, it will never, ever be heard being told by me to anyone, including my family. What I do for somebody else and what I know about somebody else remains with me. There are things that I didn't even bother to write down, because when you write things down, there's always the risk that somebody can pick that up and find out what you've written down. I write nothing down that I think may be harmful to someone else. So integrity is essential. New learning, obviously technology, we all know it's a tool, but know what you don't know and learn it. It's out there. Written communication. If you send me, and I say this all the time, a resume, or I ask for professional summaries, if you send those to me with mistakes, typographical mistakes, written communication skills that are obviously not apparent, and grammar, spelling, punctuation, all these things I look at, because someone needs to depend on you to send an email that's accurately defined, that accurately represents the message you want to deliver, and to know to whom you're sending it. So social skills also become social awareness. We live in a global world. Not everyone understands how communication exists with differences in backgrounds and cultures. So understand to who the recipient is what you focus on. You're the sender, but who, where does it land, and how will that land? The recipient. That's how you. So all these things are profoundly important skills, and that's where the trust comes from. An executive says, could you send an email and say this, this, and this? Now that person expects you to send out an email without any mistakes in it, and that you've captured the message, that you haven't written 4 pages. So it's understanding with clarity the foundation skills that are non-negotiable, and the attitude of who you are. Time, if you can't do something, you stand up and say, I can't get to it, I'll get to it tomorrow. Acknowledging what you cannot achieve, not just walking away and pretending it disappears. There are people who do that. Acknowledging what you cannot, the requests that you cannot meet, at least within that time. I can't do it now, but I can get it within an hour. And you know what? Within that hour, you do it. You set your clock. You do it. Because the trust that executives want to impart to those who support them, you just can't do this work without that in place. It must be in place. Accommodation. This executive is traveling. I know he's in China. It's 3:00 in the morning. That's just tough. I'm getting up and I'm making sure, hello, are you okay? Did the car get, it's 3 a.m. That does not matter. So the commitment to that person's well-being is what makes this role so hard to define, because it's always based on who that person happens to be. Those skills are non-negotiable. They're not. Reliability, trustworthiness, accomplishing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, or own up, and the fact that you care about this person enough to know, yes, my title is Executive Life Manager, Chief of Staff, but I can bring a cup of coffee because I'm looking at this person and I think he or she could use a cup of coffee. I'm going to bring that. You see, it doesn't bring you down. If anything, it brings you up. This role allows for greatness in a way that we can't even define. We can't define it.
I know, Melba, as a recruiter, how absolutely passionate you are about job descriptions and getting those right. And I also know that I have heard you speak a lot about why assistants shouldn't be constrained by their job descriptions.
Can you talk to us about both of those things?
Why they shouldn't be constrained. Repeat that for me, Lucy.
By their job description.
Oh, absolutely. A job description has no idea of who you are and what you're able to do. Those are just outlines. Those are just guidelines. Sometimes I get job descriptions and I'm astonished because I've spoken with that CEO. And, he'll say, okay, I'll have, my person in HR send you the job description we've been working with. It in no way relates to what I just heard that person tell me he or she is looking for. So there is no way that a job description can in any way substantiate who that person is, which is what I say to clients. Yes, and we go to college degrees and all of this, which is wonderful. And this doesn't have a college degree. Meet the person. I can write 1,000 skills on a job description. It doesn't mean that that right person may not have all those skills, but what the person has is the right attitude, temperament, the perseverance, and the willingness to learn how to expand. You can't put that in a job description. Yes, there are certain criteria that you must have. I'm not denying that. But to me, the larger component of that is the person. And question for me is, why do you do this work? How does this, and I do ask very impertinent questions. Tell me about your life. Tell me what happens when you get home. I know it's illegal and all of that, but you know what? I need to know about you so that I can position you in an environment that's going to respect who you are. Not just the fact that you know a lot of the basic functions, but you're really going to be there and step beyond expectations. I need to know about your life. I need to know what's appropriate for you. I need to know the right setting for you. I need to know who are the people you've worked with before. And that for me is a question that tells me about confidentiality. You tell me something about Melba Duncan, that she's insane about details. I will not work with that person. Why? You've just told me something about someone. I asked her about a skill. I'm not interested in a person. So confidentiality about who you've worked with and who they may become at times, if you share that with me, no thank you. So credibility and integrity, to me, yes, are just for me profoundly a part of this interview process. I look at what you've achieved, of course. I want to know what you've done. And just don't write blank statements. I filled the gap. I answer give me some examples, which is why we ask for the professional summary. And you give me an outline of what you've done. Tell me the story of your career. And again, another document that tells me if you can read, write, spell, and whether you don't share information about anyone that you should never share. So I'm strict with these.
Yes, and that is from your upbringing that we talked about right at the beginning.
That's right.
So talk to me then. I know that you talk very openly and honestly with the executives that you look after when you're trying to find them assistants. And I've heard some wonderful stories from you. But I want to know, when you're talking to them, what you're telling them, especially at the moment.
Well, first I ask them, okay, so have you ever had an assistant who you believe was just outstanding? And most say yes. But Melba, I need someone now who can go beyond those skills. Well, let's go back for a moment. Tell me what made that person outstanding for you. What were those skills? And in most instances, it was that the person felt secure in being able to ask this person to adapt to circumstances and respond appropriately. One person said to me, I didn't have to tell this assistant to call ahead of time because they know I'm always late. So to call ahead of time and say, he's on his way, even though I wasn't, and if I've checked and traffic, is going to make him even a little more delayed than we had anticipated. So please allow us this extra time. So what you've actually done is you've protected that executive from the world knowing that he loves to be late. There's some people who have these behaviors. And once you know those behaviors, you know how to be compatible. So he gave a couple of examples about that. And he said, can you find someone who can do this, who will like me well enough to want to work with me? Because Melba, at times, I had someone tell me the other day, at times I can just go on and on and on. And what I want is the person to be able to glean the most important message that has taken me 10 minutes to communicate. I said, that's fine. Once that person understands who you are and how you are, they'll be able to do that. Can you find someone like that? Yes, I can. So executives themselves know who they are. They know who they are, and they know who they need to sustain them. And they're allowed, I want to always hear that they will allow this person to expand within the role, not outside of it. Because to me, I'm looking for the person who loves this, but wants to do better and has the capacity to do better. So executives will share a lot of personal information, how they do, what they like to do, going to the gym, whatever it may be, so that I can get a sense of who would best fit with that person. And if he or she is in the gym and they've been caught up a little bit later, well, you take care of that. Look at the calendar, manage it. This is what a lot of executives are facing right now. We don't know what to do about our calendars. We don't know how to make this happen. Okay, hire the right person. You won't have to worry about it.
Yes, for sure. One of the questions I really wanted to ask you was, how do you feel about career progression for assistants? Because one of the things that I find hugely shocking when I'm talking to assistants all over the world is that a great many of them seem to be employed and then have absolutely no opportunity at all to ever get promoted or to go anywhere other than that level, and nor does their remuneration. Their executives and the businesses tend to say, well, that's who you are and that's where you're staying. I find that horrifying.
I think it is. But I think before you take the position, by the way, that is a pervasive problem in the workplace for the world of assisting. That exists, which is why I like to think our work may create a difference. But the assistant who takes on a position needs to understand in that hiring process how that role is perceived. You are hired to work for and to support. It could be a team or it could be one-on-one, whatever that may be. Speaking to that executive who is actually going to make a decision about hiring you, you have the same right to interview that executive. How do you see this role? How do you see this person who's done this role expanding within it? What are the skill sets that you expect me to have? How will we communicate when I've in any way disappointed you in what you've expected? Assistants have to start interviewing, and also interview the HR person who's representing the company, because their role is to just find the best person they think they can find. The right person, the right assistant, pursues the conversation. Tell me about the culture here. Is there opportunity for new learning? If in fact I take this position and I realize that this executive expects me to have skills in X, Y, and Z, will I be able to take these courses? Will this company support that? How does the executive assistant team realize itself here? Are they in fact representing executives in the way they want to be represented? Are they recognized for their skills? These are questions that assistants should start to ask in the interview process. Tell me about training. What are the training opportunities going forward? We understand technology, and that's wonderful and great, and we know that training in that aspect of the role is important. But what about understanding about leadership and management and business support and strategic planning? What about learning how business functions? Why wouldn't you want to offer courses in that, since I have to understand how this business functions? So finding out before you say yes to that position, what the company thinks about this role. Tell me, how would you define the assistant in this culture? How is this role perceived? What would make someone not succeed in this culture? There are questions that you can ask that you know about yourself that you feel would justify saying yes. Now, I understand it's always hard to find a position, etc., but to be in the wrong role and to be locked down in that role in many ways takes away from the innovative strength that assistants have. Creativity is a huge aspect of who great assistants happen to be. The ability to visualize and to have new learning take place all the time. I would want to work with an executive with whom I can go in and say, I'm reading about this course. I'd like very much to take it, whatever that might be. What do you think? Now, when you say that to the executive, the idea behind that is that you're taking this course so you can be better for that person and for that company, right? That's the message. I'd like to take this because I think I've heard you ask for this and this. I'd like to learn more about this so that I can actually demonstrate to you what I can do in this area. So again, that relationship is the foundation of your responsibility and reliability, but the hiring process today must be adjusted, must be looked at, must accommodate the talent that's out there, Lucy. It is just everyone's a blanket assistant. They have no idea what the distinctions are. They have no idea. But assistants have a responsibility for communicating that, for going to HR and say, I'd like to take this course. And by the way, I think we should have all of our assistant team have a gathering to hear from, this is another thing, to hear from the CEO or the leader. We want to hear from the leaders of this company, where we're going, what's happening. When you understand that, no matter who you represent or who you report to, you're still a part of this business. You're not kept separate, which is another thing I observe a lot. Assistants are sort of kept out of the mainstream of communication. It's a huge mistake that companies make. Huge mistake.
I think that that's partly because we're a very strange profession, really, because most professions have got their department, haven't they? So we can operate vertically, whereas assistants go horizontally across the business and they work across all different departments. So therefore, it's a very siloed profession, I think, and quite lonely at times.
Yes. I'm working with someone now, just in communication, where she was actually hired to work for the CEO. When she started on her first day, she was told, you're working for the CEO and, the co-CEO and co-CEO. You're working for two people now. And this was not what was set up. This was not the structure that was set up in the hiring practice. However, what she is able to do is to manage both of these executives in a way, but she sees that a lot of what she'd like to do in this one-on-one relationship may not occur. And my argument is, in that circumstance, which happens a lot, where assistants will be hired to work for one, before you know it, you're working for 3 and 4 and 5 people. It's one thing to take a position where you're working with a team. If that's the role, and you say yes, okay. But if you're taking a position that's one-on-one, then when you arrive at that office or wherever, all of a sudden you're working for 2 or 3 people. How does that happen? That happens because, once again, the role is so greatly misunderstood. All this person does is sit in front of a computer and answer a phone. That's it. They have no idea what goes into doing these functions. So my communication with this colleague of mine is identify the strengths that you have. Identify what you observe that need to be managed, that this person, this co-CEO, is himself managing, that you can take away from him and identify that. And then say, if I do this, it means that I have now expanded time that I can spend. So make it a reality, not I just don't want to, even though you were hired in a different way. Yeah. So
it's really wonderful advice. Really wonderful advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy.
I want to change tack very slightly, because I think it would be remiss of me not to talk to you about the situation in America currently, especially as you are very obviously a hugely educated and successful Black woman. What is your take on the situation at the moment?
I've been asked to speak about this a couple of times, and in many instances, I believe that I know that racism is the foundation of America, and there may be other places too, but it is inherent in this culture. It is inherent in the laws. It is inherent in the people who hold these high offices. It's inherent. Knowing that, it's not going away. We can't rely on those who are in office, no matter what that office happens to be or where those individuals happen to be. We should not be relying on those individuals to change this culture. It rests with every single one of us. Hatred is easy. It's easy to hate. What we haven't said is that if you hate others, you also hate yourself. So don't think you're showing that to other people. You're actually showing that to yourself as well. Caring and respecting for other people and respect for other people takes learning, and it takes confidence in who you are. So we, as a population, having nothing to do with who's in office, who is doing what, because I have no regard for those individuals. I have no expectation that they understand the problems that we face for those individuals who look like me. And I remember, I just said this the other day, I remember getting on an elevator in the building where I live in New York City. And I pushed the button to the 12th floor, where I live. And the woman standing next to me says, "Who do you help on the 12th floor?" And for a moment I was stunned, and then I remembered my father's response, and I said, "I was about to ask you the same thing."
Oh.
But you see, it stays with you. And do I think my business would be somewhat different? Do I think things in my life would? Of course it would. But my job is to keep the focus on what I want to get done. My job is to help people as best I can, regardless of what they look like. My job is not to have anyone tell me who I am. My argument is, until you pay all my bills, you can't tell me what to do. You just can't. And I've met some of the most wonderful people in the world. Look at who I'm talking with now, who see other things other than the color of my skin. So I can't live through that. What I have to do is be better than. There's no question. What I have to do is demonstrate that your harm and the harm that you impose is not going to change my life. And it's going to help me to teach my children how not to let it change their lives. This is going to be inherent, Lucy, because it's a part, it's the water we drink. Racism is inherent in everything in the society. Look at what the virus, just look at the problems of the virus. And who is the most, not that everyone isn't impacted, but who's the most impacted in America? People of color. People of color. And the word that I find offensive is minority. Minority means less than. So we have to change our language. What makes you the majority? I know you're talking about head count, and I'll use that with quotes. But you're really reminding us, when you speak about minorities, that we are less than. So changing our language in our communities, teaching our children how to think about advancing themselves in education, understanding well-being for our communities, building our own businesses, not relying on others to tell us how to be, where we can live, what we can do, create our own environments, and let hatred continue, because we're not going to change that, but we can let caring and respect and love for one another, as I've experienced in my life, from people who look very different than me. I've experienced I am grateful to have worked for the people I've worked with. I'm grateful for the clients. Pete Peterson will forever be the rock of my life. One day he comes in, Lucy, and he says, and this was after we had had another uprising about racism in this country, and he said, Melba, I'm a minority. I know what it means to be a minority. And I looked at him. I said, what? How are you a minority, Pete? He says, I am a Greek from Nebraska. I said, and that makes you a minority? And, I started smiling. He said, if you think that way, then you are. People give us very profound messages. It doesn't mean that when I open the door, I don't have to somewhat worry. It doesn't mean that when I want to live in a particular place, I may not be able to get it. But I always say, okay, I know why I'm not getting this. And I will tell you, my parents bought a home in Ocean Parkway, which was very high level. My father would always go in that direction. And around the block, there was this huge building where I thought I would bring my daughter, because my mother took care of my daughter, and then I would drop her off right around the corner. They wouldn't rent it to me. So there are things that in my life, I say, okay, you don't have to, but I went down the block and I was able to get another place. Not that it is trivial, that's not it. But I will not let those experiences deter me from what I want to do and who I want to help. I won't do it. And if you won't hire me as a recruiter, I understand. That's perfectly fine. Someone else will.
You are such a role model for so many people across the world in the assisting profession, but particularly I would have thought for Black assistants. For those that are looking and seeing your success and are aspiring to be the same, what would you say to them?
Leave Black alone. What we're looking for is intelligence. What we're looking for is competence. What we're looking for is the ability to demonstrate those habits, achievements, accomplishments. Speak from your strength, not because if we think about color, we're going to start apologizing. It just seems natural. We're going to start accepting. It just seems natural. No, know your strength and speak through that. If someone will not hire you because of the color of your skin, you don't want to be there anyway. There's always going to be someone who will see beyond, just with me, will see beyond the color of my skin and say, when can you start? Because there's something about you that person will readily connect with. And if that person is not proud to have you support him or her, then don't work for that person. I understand how difficult it is, but don't ever negotiate who you are for somebody else. Don't do it. Don't do it. So Black American assistants or wherever you are from, have the best skills. Be the person that can outpace everyone. And feel good about that. Feel good about that. And you will see that people will come to you because they want your intelligence. They want your confidence. They want to know that, I'm here. You're not going to change what you look like. That doesn't happen. And we look this way for a reason. There's a reason why we're all different. There's a reason. Figure out what that reason is, why you look the way you do, but also know that you have non-negotiable skills that really outpaces everybody else. That's the only answer I can think of, because you have to be better than to step beyond what is being said about you. You have to be better than.
Profound. I feel like, your career has been so extraordinary. You've been instrumental in so much positive change for this profession. What are you hoping that your legacy will be?
oh my goodness, that standing in a space of achievement and accomplishment is why we exist, which is the brain power that, by the way, Lucy, it's the brain power we tend to ignore. We don't realize, we have incredible brain power. New learning is the answer. Well-being, making sure your life is what you want it to be. We all know what we want. Reach for the sky if that's what you want, and never stop. I don't care who tells you no. Don't stop. Have that plan for yourself and live through that plan, but also help others. If you see someone who could help, who needs a little bit of what it is take time to share with that person. Here's what I do. That's how I got my first job. Here's what I do, Melba. Let me tell you how to do that. So pride has no place, but eagerness for learning is essential. That's what I want my legacy to be.
And you have your beautiful grandchildren
Yes.
that I know you're staying with right now, and I know you're particularly close to them.
Yes.
What do you feel that you have done in order to forge the way forward for them, particularly?
I think is to say, again, know what you enjoy. I have one granddaughter who loves to dance. I mean, they do this thing now online and all this other things, which I'm trying to understand. But, and I'm trying to be very careful about. But one is a great speaker, great language skills.
Funny that.
The other is far more personal, as I think you saw her here, Francesca. And Angelica is what she wants to be in space. She says, I want to work in outer space. This is what her goal is. And I said, fine. Know what that means and get started. Get started. And so one of the things I ask them to do every day is write a sentence for me about what it is that disturbs you and what it is that you want to achieve. Oh, Nana, no, I want you to do that because I want you to be proud of who you are. I want you to understand your grandfather and your grandmother. And I want you to understand, exactly, or your great-grandfather and your great-grandmother, what they represent, and our family, what we represent. Don't ever turn your back on who you are, but make yourself outstanding in whatever it is you have to do. Failure is not acceptable in this. We do not fail. And if we fail, we learn what not to do next. So they look at me and say, that's right, we know failure is not, I said, that's right. Failure is not, it's not trivialized. Because if you live and you look like us, you can't accept failure. You have to make things work the way you want. And certainly today, kids have a great advantage. When I look outside and I see all these young people, and I look across this country, Lucy, and I see the young people who care. I say I'm looking on TV and I say, you see this? These are young people. They are changing the world. They have no regard for what's taking place elsewhere. They care about what's not right. And that's what I want for them.
There is hope. there is hope in the new generation.
Absolutely.
If they end up being half as exceptional as women as you are, I think we shall all be very lucky. Melba, it has just been an honor and a privilege to talk to you this afternoon. I just feel so blessed that you gave up your time to share your messages with all the people watching and to be the one to facilitate that. So thank you so
Lucy.
much.
Thank you for the invitation. I will always say yes to Lucy. Thank you. Thank you so
Melba.
very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey everybody, this is Melissa Escabel, and I've got some exciting news. Every Sawbuck seminar I've done this year and the rest of the sessions we have planned for 2020 will be available to you to watch and learn from for a full year with my new Watch and Learn subscription. You'll be automatically registered for every Sawbuck seminar we do for the next 12 months. No need to register each time or keep an eye on the sawbuckseminars.com site. You'll get a confirmation email a week in advance, and the price is only $100 a year. We also have a corporate subscription deal as well for groups of 10, which include free dedicated time with yours truly every month. Visit melissaescabel.com/watch-learn for more details and to subscribe. By the way, if you've purchased any Sawbuck seminar this year, through June 30th, you automatically get a second year free on an individual subscription. Looking forward to seeing you soon. Take care, everybody.
What we do here is go back.